Hello everyone. So I'm going to talk about Keiretsu. Uh, First, I will give some background about it. Like many business firms have tried to figure out why Japan is such a hard place to crack. How come we have been knocking on the doors? We have been doing all the things that the Japanese say we should do. Like set up the shop in Japan. We hire people of Japan. We invest money in their country, and it just doesn't seem to work. So just to start from the beginning, what actually is a Keiretsu? In general, a Keiretsu is a group of independent companies. They share a single corporate governance structure in the sense that they have a meeting of the presidents of each of the top companies. Maybe once a month, all the presidents will get together in what is called a Sanchokai, and they have very often cross holdings. That is, they hold shares in each other's company. And like the big horizontal Keiretsu always have a bank in the middle of the group, and so they are very connected to economic connections as well as interlocking directorships or through the personal relationship between the companies. That happens that this is not just a small collection of companies, but it actually becomes a real corporate group. There are different types of Keiretsu. First of all, there are horizontal Keiretsu. The horizontal Keiretsu used to be the six big ones. They all had a bank at the center, and then they had trading companies, mining companies, metal companies, and all other types of companies, as you can see in this picture. And they look like a giant solar system. Then there are vertical Keiretsu, who are members, individual members of this horizontal Keiretsu that were involved in the manufacturing. Think of the auto companies, steel, camera, electronics. Underneath each of these major companies in the horizontal Keiretsu, there would be a manufacturing of vertical Keiretsu that could go down anywhere from 5,000 to 30,000 companies. So each of these vertical Keiretsu was part of a big horizontal Keiretsu, and we're talking about a huge chunk of the Japanese economy. So how did this idea come from? So we need to look about the history of Japan a bit. So in the 1870, in the early 1860s, the samurais became salarymen, and they brought the Bushido Samurai Code in the business. This included the principles of harmony along with the loyalty, which was encouraged, leading to the rise of family-based Keiretsu type groupism. In 1870s, Meiji Restoration took place, and the Japanese were wary of the rise of the Europeans who had crumbled most of the Asian empires. Seeing the a rising need to adopt the Western technologies, the Japanese students were sent to bring these practices. And this was when they saw the successful branches, Rockefeller, Carnegie, and Ford groups, which shaped the present-day Keiretsu. In 1900s, Japanese imperialism was on the rise, supported by strong economic groups, which were called as Zaibatsus, which were the predecessors of Keiretsu. They captured Taiwan, Korea, Manchuria, and practiced economic models before trying it in Japan. Thus, Japan was exposed to more robust economic practices. And without going into too much historical explanation, the Zaibatsu were 19th century conglomeration of business that were all started, owned by one family. They were family oriented. So where did that idea come from? They just copied it from the US and Europe. They wanted to have Rockefeller type business, Morgan and Carnegie style business. And the government liked that idea because it looked like a good way to catch up with the West. So the government was not in the antitrust business, and they said, okay, you want to put together a bunch of companies, you want money, we will loan you money. Build up an industrial combine, that is great. I think that's terrific, and we will look more and more like the Western countries we are trying to catch up. So, long story short, these Zaibatsus grew and grew, and they became so powerful that they practically controlled Japanese industry and even many government officials. So, when the war ended, the Japanese came over and they saw Japanese as one of the key factors leading to the war. So, Zaibatsus were banned. To rebrand themselves, many of the old Zaibatsus, so they changed their names like Mitsubishi Bank became Kieda Bank, and it was like hitting a giant blob of mercury. They broke up for a while, like Mitsubishi Trading broke into 170 different companies, but within a year, all these small pieces of mercury started coming together, growing again. All of a sudden, the blob became bigger and bigger and formed the present day Keiretsus. So, why were they allowed to rejoin? Like first they were broken up, then why were they allowed to join? Because It was a time when communist revolution in China was on rise, and the Asia was ripe to go red. So people were terrified and they needed Japan as a bulwark against growing communism. So they allowed the Keiretsu to grow, and the growth of this Keiretsu was a key factor in the growth of the Japanese economy. One of the things that accelerated the economic growth. Right after the war, Japanese major business was exporting silk and cotton. Within a decade, they are exporting cars, cameras, electronics. How did all this happen in such a short period of time? A lot of this was because of the power of Keiretsu unification. Never in human history has that kind of economic miracle happened with a defeated nation coming back on and coming out with a roar. In 1960s and 70s, US companies are starting to get some muscle, they are starting to run and they have some cash and they wanted to start buying companies around the world. And Japanese were like, we don't want any mergers and accusation by some foreigners. So the word was, let's use the Keiretsu to keep the people out. Also, group sharing is much easier than competing. For example, a representative from Mitsubishi Motors once quoted that we never have to worry about a sales figure because anytime our sales look like they are little low, we go to the bank and tell them we are little short this year, and they tell everyone in the group to buy some cars, and so we are back on track. So now talking about the working culture of the Keiretsu, like what makes it unique. So first of all, it is very worker centric and it is very dependent on the highly educated and self-driven labor. And being worker centric, most of the quality improving innovation have been suggested by workers on site. The deeply embodied Confucian principles of loyalty and commitment to the respective firms are something that many other nations have tried to imbibe. Then there is lifetime employment is practiced, which encourages loyalty and draws for uh, innovative practices. So Japanese are generally more likely to stay with one firm for a longer duration, even in the smaller firms. This long-term employment policy encourages firms to invest in the development of their workforce. Third, rotation is practiced to dissuade the employees from changing the firm. The firms rotate the workers from job to job within the firm, making them more firm specific. Due to this, the employees know all about this firm, but they lack the skills that are required in other firms. So they are more likely to get promotion in that firm rather than in some other firm. Fourth, seniority wages are awarded for being a lifetime employee, and this is also consistent with the Confucian belief that showing respect for the seniors and elders. Fifth, enterprise unions are heavily backed by both the management and labor. For example, if you are committing to the lifetime employment and you are making yourself firm specific, then definitely you need an union which negotiates directly with a specific firm. This is why there is presence of enterprise firm and they have both the white and blue collar employees and therefore Japan has one of the least wage differentials. Now, when we talk about the Japanese economy, it is also a different type of economy when compared to others in the West. For example, Japanese economy has imbibed several of its neo-Confucian values and therefore is called the new traditional economy. And it has served for as a model for several Asian economies like Korea, where we have a Keiretsu counterpart known as Keibo. So now economies also vary depending on the government intervention to redistribute the income in the economy. That also depends on how unequal the economy is to begin with. Since Japan already has an equitable distribution, the government does very less redistributing. The West has a lesser concentrated economy than Japan because of the presence of strong antitrust enforcement, while in Japan, uh, it is not that rigid. In Japan, union membership is much higher than United States, but the labor management relations have been more cooperative with one of the lowest strike rates because of the presence of enterprise unions, which are specific to firm and thus are catered in a more efficient way. Then the state-owned firms of communist nations are less efficient as they lose their money. As when they lose their money, they get bailed out. Comparing this to Keiretsu system, the corporations are linked to major banks that impose hard budget constraints, leading to higher efficiencies. Now, Japan also has been able to focus on long-term goals. Why was this? Why were they able to do so? Because they have a stable government of the LDP party, which has been ruling since 1950s, except from some 4 5 years. This has helped the bureaucrats to focus on long-term goals. Also, the presence of long-term employees and long-term relationship with banks have helped the firms to focus on long-term gains at the expense of low profitability. And long-term bank financing helps to resist the stock market pressures like running for short-term profits or the trades of takeover. This is supported by the insulation provided by cross-holdings between banks and firms. Banks are more willing to agree for long-term view as the Japanese saving rates are quite high, allowing low interest rate, which in turn trigger capital investment and a longer time horizon. For example, if we see VCR technology was invented in US and was initially produced in US. However, the US producers voluntarily gave up VCRs because the market had a very slow growth rate and which was not sustainable by US firms, which on contrary, the Japan firms having long-term focus were able to do so and they gained entry in this market and became the top producers of VCR technology.